Welcome into Bucs Insider, coming to you from the Bucs studio, presented by Ticketmaster. Casey Phillips here with Scott Smith and Bree Dix, and we got OTAs happening. Again, every week it just feels a little closer, a little more football.
What does that even stand for?
Organized team activities.
Very good.
Let's go. Whenever you quiz me, I get so nervous. I'm like, I should know these things, and I would be very bad on any kind of show like Jeopardy, because in the moment, even if you were like, "What's your name?" I'd be like,
"Oh, I know, yeah,
oh,
definitely."
No. I'm very bad.
If you're watching the show,
everybody's
on your
a genius.
Couch, you get them all.
Everybody's a genius.
You get we have 8 of them, 8 OTAs over the next 2 weeks.
Okay, yeah, this week, next week, then the mandatory mini camp.
Right.
So because of OTAs going on, especially right now, we're getting a chance to hear from some different people, media availability, and I know that someone that we got to hear from that is it going to be really interesting to see this year is Jaylen McMillan. That this is a guy that really had especially a great last half of the season this last year, came on in a really big way, and of course now you've drafted Emeka Egbuka. What is that going to mean for these guys? And just so many incredible wide receivers on this roster. So, Bree, what stood out to you about getting to hear from Jaylen and kind of the expectations for him this year?
One of the things I loved that he said was that during the offseason, his priority was really gaining strength and gaining mass. And he said last year he felt a little bit skinny, so he said he wanted to add on some weight. Made a joke about eating a lot of protein, and I think you can really just see that he's bulked up a little bit, especially upper body. But I think just with being able to play with physicality, whether over the middle of the field, along the boundary, I think that's going to really benefit him against smaller DBs. And also just, he said, being where his feet are. He said last season when he would look a little bit to the future, or kind of some things that he wanted to do, was where he kind of lost sight of and had some mistakes. So he said this season really just being where his feet are and just kind of prioritizing day by day instead of looking at the full picture.
I really enjoyed his honesty about the mental side of it last year, that he did say a lot like, yeah, you know what, there were a couple times that the lights got pretty bright.
Yeah.
And it felt like then, especially when Mike and Chris went down, there was even more added pressure, but also that feeling of, man, it's my time now. And it felt like he really rose to that challenge as the season went on, got over some of those maybe rookie bright light jitters. And you always hear about the year 1 to year 2 growth that a lot of players have, and I feel like Jaylen is a guy that could be really true for, because of what he admitted was holding him back a bit, was that idea of just that rookie bright light feeling that will now be gone this season. And man, if he is going to have a jump, this is the year to have it, because there is a lot of competition in that room. You know, those reps, those passes, those targets, you're going to have to fight and claw for that with just so many talented people.
Kind of a feeling they'll all get used.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, God, I can't imagine that for Josh Grizzard of just the glutton of weapons. Like, he's just got to be in there like, oh my gosh, we need to make sure we have about 30 possessions a game.
Right. Well, just the versatility of really all of them, whether it's J-Mac, Emeka, Chris, being able to play outside, inside.
True.
So
yeah, and so I do feel like, of course, the wide receiver room is where the most discussion has been about competition from just there being so many talented people. But the cornerback room also now has a really interesting competition to keep an eye on, largely due to the draft as well, of adding a couple pieces and fairly high picks, fairly high rounds. And so, we've got to hear from Zion McCollum, and I think it's going to be really interesting to just see what that room looks like this year. So let's hear what he had to say to the media.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, off the bat, it's new energy. And in the room, you can just kind of feel it. The intensity is just starting to rise up. And it's good. I mean, to embrace it as a room and to come together, I mean, everybody's fighting to be that next level, get to that next level. And, we're trying to catch these young guys up as quickly as possible. Going into training camp, we want to be able to go into the season at our best. And when they're playing at their best, it allows us to rise our game to an even higher level. And so they've just been getting in shape, getting under the playbook. But it's good to have new energy in that room for sure.
First of all, exactly the attitude you want everybody to have, right? Of welcoming new additions, new competition, knowing that raises everyone, also wanting to still help guys get acclimated. That is the kind of locker room guy that the Bucs value, is someone like Zion McCollum, who you can tell just has the perfect attitude of these new guys coming in. What a great vet to be learning from. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be an interesting thing to see how that cornerback room shakes out this year, Scott.
Well, yeah, none of this was a surprise to him either, because he was told in his exit interview, if you don't know what that is, at the end of the season, the coaches sit down with all the players one by one and kind of give them the lay of the land. Here's where we are. Here's what we expect from you next year, that sort of thing. They told him they were going to bring in people
Yeah.
They needed more in that cornerback
Yeah.
room, which was obvious when the rash of injuries last year made that such a problem position for a while. But we're not just talking about second-round pick Benjamin Morrison and third-round pick Jacob Parrish. I mean, remember also we did re-sign Bryce Hall. We signed veteran Kendall Vildor.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of guys in there that'll be vying for playing time. And I just think that Zion feels like it's his fourth year. It's his contract year. I mean, he did admit, they asked him, does that add anything to it? And he said, yeah, that just basically was more of a chip on your shoulder. And he's had a nice first 3 years. But going to your contract year means a lot to these guys. And I think he said something he'd like to obviously continue playing here, and so would we. But whether he's proven it to himself or to other teams or to us, he really probably he's motivated to have a big year.
One of the things that I think is so impressive about and helpful about the fact that the Bucs do love to do the homegrown talent thing, you have a lot of guys any given year that are in a contract year because of how often you keep having these, so many guys from the same rookie class end up staying with you and being in big roles. And everyone knows, I think, that if you're in a contract year, there might be just that little extra something. And there's some big name guys that are in a contract year this year, which is going to be interesting. But, also I know we got to hear from Graham Barton. And as we talk about the year 1 to year 2 jump, this is a guy that I am really excited to see what year 2 holds for him, because he had to come in as a rookie at a very important position that was pretty new to him. Yeah. And there's a lot to learn there at the center position, a lot of important things about the way you're directing the whole offensive line. And he just has talked about how much his confidence has already grown from last year to this year, and how he feels and the closeness of that offensive line, the way they all help each other. And I just think he's a guy that could have a really even bigger jump this year because of that confidence level.
Yeah, and you talk about these OTAs, and they are, it always has to be stressed, they are voluntary. Guys don't have to be here. I think the coaches were pretty pleased with the level of participation. And some guys do some of them, but not all of them. But, like Baker Mayfield's out there. It probably means more to some players than others. And there's a lot of install going on right now, so how well you know the playbook determines how much this matters to you. But so I'm not trying to say he's speaking for everybody, but he was just speaking for himself when he said, this is an important time of the year. He said, there's so much to learn. And I think he was talking about himself.
Yeah. Yep.
And it's true, because I think you mentioned it. That's one of the most difficult positions on the field in terms of mentally understanding what you have to do. And even a year in, in that regard, as he said, he's a lot farther along now than he was a year ago, but there's still a lot to learn, which is the way he put it.
And I don't know all the details of how much he versus Baker is making some of the calls and protections and calling that out. That's another thing that you can always, as a center, be taking on more to help your quarterback out more. So as they grow, that can be a really big part of it as well. I also just would love to point out that while that B-roll was playing of him, there was shots of him working out in the weight room. And I just think about what the weights are when I'm lifting, that he was doing that pull-down machine. And it was like the whole, there it is. Watch, look at how many plates.
They're all going up.
They're all going up. Mine would be about 2 of those plates if I'm lucky. I just really feel like it's great when we get to show perspective on that. So that was all. I just wanted to show that part. So also, I know last week we were discussing some of the rules that were happening. And as we recorded the show, basically things were getting voted on. Right after we finished the show, they had the vote on the tush push, and we had made a prediction. This is why we don't gamble, because we apparently
well, we're not allowed to.
Because it's like, man, we really thought this was going to go one way, and then it went another way, and so we wanted to talk about that a bit.
All the tea leaves seem to say that if you're reading the tea leaves, it seemed like, okay, they figured out how to do it, and they're going to ban this, and then it didn't pass. And I don't know if Jeffrey Lurie and Jason Kelsey's speech had anything to do with it. They left that room, and only the owners went into another room so they could talk it over. And apparently the vote was, okay, so what we're talking about is banning the tush push. And they needed 24 votes, needed 75% of the 32 teams, and they only got 22, which is close. Which makes me think the issue isn't over.
Yeah, when it's that close, there's always a chance in the future, for sure. Also, I know we wanted to talk about the onside kick changes.
Yeah. So last year with the new kickoff rule, obviously you couldn't do an onside kick as a surprise, because with the new formation, everybody's down in the other end, right? So you could still do one, but you had to declare it, and so there's no surprise onside kick. And it could only be done if you were losing in the fourth quarter. And now they changed it. They tweaked that rule that you can do it any time that you're losing. any time in the game. It doesn't have to wait. Now, see here, that was us successfully converting an onside kick. Just a perfect bounce there from that Chase
when
McCollum
it works,
kick.
it's electric.
Yeah.
And then Tavier Thomas with the nice catch. But here's the thing. That was one of only 3 successful onside kicks in the entire league last year.
Yeah, it's not a thing that happens super often,
Right.
which I know you're okay with.
Yeah, out of 50.
Yeah, okay.
6%.
Wow.
So one more change. Last year, and I didn't even realize this, to be honest with you, I didn't even realize this. When you line up to kick at the 35 for the onside kick, the kicker's at the 35, or the ball is, and the other players all had to line up at 34. So now they moved it back. Now they can stand at the 35.
Hey, that 1 yard, that could make a difference.
The attempt is to try to raise the success rate of the onside kick, and you wanted to have a little debate about that, apparently?
I did, because I'm really excited about this. When we were talking about this in the show, whenever Scott and I have differing opinions, we get very excited that we get to argue about it on this show. I am always all for anything that can help games stay closer longer. Now, I'm not just talking about Bucs games, because of course then we all have heart attacks, maybe unnecessarily. I just mean at large in sports. I don't want to know a game is over when there's still a lot of time left. So the more opportunities there are, like an onside kick, you cannot tell me that is not so electric when it happens. Now, I'm not saying they need to make it where it's suddenly a successful thing 50% of the time. Like, it's 6% right now. If it goes up to even 10%, I'm like, that to me is, that'd be perfect. It's still very rare, hard to do, but I want it to happen a little more, because now I don't like the feeling that it feels like an onside kick. You're just like, this isn't going to happen most likely. That is my take. Your turn to argue.
You said you're not just talking about Bucs games, but let's talk about Bucs games. If you're rooting for the Bucs and you're up by 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter, then you deserve to be in a position where you're probably going to win. And I don't personally like that. I don't want to make it any easier for a team that has played badly enough to be down by 2 touchdowns in the fourth quarter
to give them
a shot. I mean, I'm like, if I'm watching an onside kick by the other team, and I'm very nervous, and then I'm very upset if they succeed, because I'm like, why are they getting another chance? We dominated this whole game. Maybe it's because I was here in 2003 for the famous Indianapolis Buccaneers Monday Night Football game, the most dramatic collapse in Bucs history.
So this take is coming from a place of PTSD.
If you were at that game, you would know how I feel. And that game was on NFL Network last night, so only adding fuel to the fire here.
No. The timing, as we're going to
I don't really want to get hugely into it. I don't want to trigger anybody else out there who remembers that game.
We should have put a
But there was one successful onside kick, and you don't need to know all the rest, but it was just one incredible thing after another, and Peyton Manning and Tony Dungy and the Colts came back and won that game, blah, blah, blah. But I don't want to make onside kicks easier. I think, we're giving them a backdoor way back into the game when they don't deserve it.
Now, what I will say
is...
Oh, good.
I think it's supposed to be a slim chance. That's kind of the purpose.
And I'm still good with a slim chance. I just want it to be slightly less. What I will say, I will give you this. Because of the other rule change of now the touchback going even further, where we discuss it now, that's going to give teams an even bigger chance. I will say I wish it was one or the other. I do think now both things is maybe getting a little close to too much because of that. So I would rather make the onside kick almost more likely than the touchback
I'll trade you that. If you want to trade here,
we found a compromise.
Put the touchback back at the 30, I'll give you your onside kick.
Because I don't want it to just make it easier to kick a field goal.
Right.
That's not as fun or exciting. But I do like the idea of it being a little tiny bit easier.
I think we figured this out.
We've solved all the problems.
Get Roger Goodell on the phone.
We need to start debating all the world's problems on here, because we've just solved it. We've solved it right here.
What do you know about global warming?
Oh, boy. On that note, that's going to do it for us on this edition of Bucs Insider. Thanks so much for joining us, and we'll see you next time.